I just want to introduce myself a wee bit in terms of my personal involvement. I'm an architect. My practice has been involved in a lot of cultural regeneration in Edinburgh, my home city, a big town, a small city, compact, dense, with lots of green in it, lots of drama, including cultural buildings like dance space underneath the castle. I'm very concerned with expanding the ideal of sustainability to talk about the renewal and reuse of historic buildings, up to including, we got the first ever BREEAM outstanding for a listed building, and making best use of our old buildings is at the heart of sustainability. We used to think that kind of knocking them down, sticking them in a landfill site and building some fall apart rubbish out past the ring road was sustainability, but this is radical sustainability. And we should think the same way about our towns and cities. At the heart of thinking about our towns is understanding that these are our true eco-towns. We all see a load of rubbish proposals for some developers' greenbelt or farmland proposal that talks about it as being an eco-town. It's not an eco-town. That old city, that old town nearby, which they're turning their back on, that has all the amenities and all the infrastructure. That's a true eco-town, and that relates to buildings and towns too. Done a lot of work around the raggedy fringe of Scotland, north and west. Done a lot of work on the homes and communities, particularly understanding the use of new technology and materials. This is a tenement on site in mass timber. No polythene. We don't wrap our homes in poly bags like most of new homes are. Health and well-being are at the heart. I've done a lot of work with empowering communities over decades in Edinburgh and elsewhere, and that kind of led to leading and authoring the Scottish Government's 2013 Town Centre Review, which helped lead to the Community Empowerment Act, which gives communities real powers to adopt and take over and develop historic buildings, old buildings within their communities, and establish the town centre first principle, which local authorities are still working out how to embed in their legislation. Some are doing in decision making, some are doing it better than others. I'm talking in a way as a tourist with apologies. My experience of Irish towns is, maybe I shouldn't apologise, circumnavigating Ireland in a car long time ago, and then most relevantly in 2018, cycling from Mizenhead to Malonhead, a wonderful, wonderful trip over it was 9 days it took us to get up the west coast. And rather lovely, we got to stay in a hotel in the heart of 9 towns along the way. You really get to know a place and understand it through doing that. The bad things and the good things. And that was our wee t-shirt we got on the way. And rather happily, that's a Celtic joint symbol, the Celtic knot, understanding that as a shared Irish and Scottish thing, and really enjoying the fact that your youth have celebrated that and these wonderful Celtic knot patterns they put on roads all the way up the rural west coast of Ireland. Loved it. Negative thing you learn is that whereas in Scotland our town, the integrity of our towns are threatened by these big soulless diddy box estates that go around the edge of our towns. In Ireland, it's more dispersed, individual, long strings along your roads, and sometimes wondered how you could call something wild when it was in 75% lined by bungalows. So that was a negative view. A more positive one is that every single hotel we stayed in all the way up is in the centre of a wee town. You walked out the hotel and within about 10 steps, you found there was a bar playing live music with dancing going on. And that's a fantastic, tender and beautiful thing at the heart of particularly obviously the West Coast, but felt like it was a community thing, a sharing thing that went on over Ireland, really special. Of course, you learn a lot of things which are common to Scotland and to Ireland. And I was really impressed by the number of really interesting planned squares you had at the heart of your towns. And of course, observed as anyone would, how threatened they are by cars coming through them, and how us as visitors or locals felt that they were kind of pinned to the edge by the dominance of the car in places like Westport and County Mayo. And you look at a place like that, you look just behind that square, there's lots of car parks given over to shopping centres, and you think, why can't they be used more to supply the square? Why can't you take the cars out of there? You wouldn't lose much parking overall, and you'd have a much nicer place to walk into. Or in Donegal, again, you've got that wonderful tight urban square, which feels like it's just really threatened by roads all the way around. And you look at it and see, why can't the traffic be diverted down the south and to the northeast, and you leave a pedestrian zone to the west, which then connects down to the beautiful river behind. Why can't you do a land grab on places like that and make places which are more commercially successful, because they're so much more pleasant to be in, and there's so much more meeting and greeting, not just for tourists, but for locals too. We forget one of the things about towns and cities that really works is that they have that creative capital embedded in them, the meeting of people on the way to work, having lunch in a place where you can sit out. All of that assists in the commercial success of a place. And something we've done, 4 things I've learned recently from what we should be doing with town centres to establish with you. On the back of that, Edinburgh's doing this thing that I can only describe as a kind of power grab on behalf of the cyclists and pedestrians. It's using the excuse of COVID to take back huge areas of road from cars. Of course, the roads that in the past that people used to walk up and down and have gradually been taken over by the private car. So the power grab of the roads has been a great thing, and I'm working with the council to look at whether schools can expand their playgrounds into the street, whether cafes can expand their sitting out like Donegal could have into the street, as well as places for bicycles and pedestrians to walk out. The second thing, which I didn't manage to establish through the original town centre review, and we're still trying to work out, is how to use the empty homes at the hearts of our towns and cities. Scotland has, there are various figures, 30,000, 37,000 empty homes across the nation. And the idea that we should be building more Diddy boxes to relieve the housing crisis before we have used those homes is crazy. The new home will cost 120 grand or more. The home converted out of an empty flat in the centre of the city and the centre of a town will cost 20 grand, 40 grand, 60 grand. Harder work, more complicated, but much more valuable, brings footfall back onto the streets, using the local bars, using the local shops. We have an empty homes officer established now in every local authority in Scotland, but they don't always get access to the empty flats over shops because they're registered as commercial property. Only in Perth and Kinross are they able to do that. So that's something we've never managed to absolutely establish, and I would recommend that Ireland tried to do that, to bring these empty flats back into use. The third thing is to look at policy. I'm involved in lots of policy initiatives in various places in Scotland, particularly with the Commonweal left-wing think tank. We just published our Property Tax for Scotland paper, replacing the council tax and taxing land. We need to tax land and property. We need to tax wealth more than income. We need to rebalance that. And of course, looking at towns and looking at retail, we need to shift the burden of tax from bricks and mortar onto digital. And we can do what we like with hanging baskets and initiatives, etc. But the government needs to use the big levers of tax reform, which Scotland can't do on its own. We need Westminster still to assist with that. Ireland, you are more flexible, obviously. You're a sovereign nation. You should be looking at trying to move tax onto from bricks and mortar and onto digital. And the third thing, sorry, the fourth.
Just a minute left there, Malcolm.
Sorry, my last slide. Thank you, Steve. The last thing is just to understand that post-pandemic, what we have learned is the importance of community, having people to look after us, having neighbours to do our old folks shopping for them, having a place to walk to, having open air, a park. Post-pandemic, we need to relearn. Cities will suffer without the big commute, but we want to lose the big commute. Local towns, local communities, places that care for you are the places of our future. So we're not trying to recover something nostalgic, but in caring for our towns and cities, we're looking to the future. Thank you.